All living things reproduce themselves. They have offspring. These offspring look a lot like their parents.
In fact, some living things produce offspring that are exactly like themselves. These bacteria, for example, reproduce by dividing in two. Each of the new bacteria has the same genes as the original parent. This is called asexual reproduction because only one parent is involved. Now, if I were to divide in two like that, the world would be blessed with two of me. And if each of these two me's were to divide, there would be 4 exact copies. You can see how this might get a little tiresome, having so many of me around.
Fortunately, that's not how we humans reproduce, or most animals and plants for that matter. We reproduce by sexual reproduction. In sexual reproduction, offspring inherit genetic characteristics from 2 parents.
You may have had someone tell you that you have your father's eyes or your mother's smile. Obviously, you don't have their eyes or smile. They have them, but you do have their genes. And these genes give you the shape and color of your eyes and the contours of your mouth, and a whole lot more.
So how do we inherit these genes? And how does a new human being form? In human sexual reproduction, 2 different kinds of sex cells, an egg from the mother and a sperm from the father, join together. And from the fusion of these 2 cells and the genetic information they contain, a new individual develops inside a woman, and after about 9 months, a baby is born. That's the really short version of how human reproduction occurs.
To fill in the details, we need to start a little earlier in the story by looking at the different reproductive systems of males and females. It's hardly news that males and females are different.
But besides making our lives a whole lot more interesting, these differences make it possible for us to produce the different kinds of sex cells, eggs and sperm.
In males, the reproductive system is made up of a pair of testes, a variety of tubes called ducts, several glands, the penis, and the scrotum. Let's start with the testes. The testes produce sperm and male sex hormones such as testosterone. The sex hormones maintain the male's physical build: wide shoulders, narrow waist, tall stature. These hormones are also necessary for sperm to be produced.
The testes are in a pouch of skin outside the core of the body called the scrotum. The testes don't function well at body temperature. In the scrotum, the testes are kept several degrees cooler, the ideal temperature for sperm production.
When we look inside the testes, we see tiny coiled tubes. Sperm are produced inside these tubes. Cells that line the tubes divide to form the sex cells. These cells go through a series of changes that create the sperm.
Inside the head of each sperm is the material that contains the genetic information that a man contributes to the development of a new human. This genetic information ensures that a child will have some of the characteristics of his or her father.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The likelihood of any one particular sperm doing this is really small. In his early teens, a male starts producing millions of sperm every day. This continues throughout adulthood. While inside the male's body, sperm can live about 2 months. When the sperm are formed, they're pushed out of the testes into an area called the epididymis that's on the top of each testis. The epididymis is both a nursery where the sperm mature and a waiting area where they stay until they're needed.
Like the testes and scrotum, the penis is outside the core of the body. The penis has 3 columns of spongy tissue. When a guy is sexually excited, blood fills this tissue and makes the penis erect.
If he's excited enough, sperm leave the epididymis and travel through the sperm ducts. Secretions from several glands are added along the way. Together, the secretions and sperm are called semen.
Semen is pushed from the sperm ducts and into the urethra, which runs out of the body through the penis. The release of semen from the body is called ejaculation.
Ejaculation doesn't just happen as a result of having sex. Most teenage boys have had the experience of waking up in the morning to wet and sticky sheets, the result of a nocturnal emission or wet dream. This might cause some embarrassment, but it's totally natural and normal.
That wraps up an overview of the male reproductive system, one half of the partnership necessary for human reproduction to occur. Now we'll look at the other half. Most of the female reproductive system lies deep inside the pelvis. There are a pair of ovaries and a pair of fallopian tubes, which are connected to the uterus, which is about the size of a pear. At the base of the uterus is a very strong muscle called the cervix. The cervix is at the top of the vagina, which opens to the outside of the body. The vulva is the external part of the female reproductive system. It includes the major and minor lips, the openings of the urethra and vagina, and the clitoris. Like the penis in a male, the clitoris has many nerve endings that make it very sensitive to touch.
Just as the testes in a male produce sperm and hormones, the female's two ovaries produce eggs and sex hormones, such as estrogen. When a girl reaches puberty, these hormones cause some major changes in her body. Breasts develop, hips get broader. Her hormones also control the production of mature eggs in pregnancy.
An egg contains the genetic information that a woman contributes to the development of a new human being. Each ovary contains hundreds of eggs. Unlike males who produce new sex cells their whole lives, females are born with all of the eggs they will have.
A hormone from the brain stimulates an immature egg to begin to develop. It also stimulates the lining of the uterus to become thicker. About every 28 days, hormones trigger the release of a mature egg from one of the ovaries.
Tiny, finger-like projections on a fallopian tube beat and draw the egg in. The egg travels through the fallopian tube. If it doesn't run into a sperm, it continues into the uterus. Inside the uterus, the egg disintegrates and the signal "no pregnancy" goes out. This triggers the breakdown of the lining of the uterus. The blood and cell debris leave the body. This is called menstruation.
Okay, we've looked at the female and male reproductive systems that make it possible for humans to reproduce.
Now we'll look at how those systems work together and the events that lead to a new human life. For a new human being to form, an egg and a sperm have to get together. During sexual intercourse, the male's penis releases or ejaculates semen containing millions of sperm into the vagina. The sperm begins swimming towards the cervix. Of the millions of sperm in the vagina, only a tiny fraction are able to get through the cervix and into the uterus. Propelled by their whip-like tails, sperm continue to swim through the uterus and into the fallopian tubes.
If an egg is traveling through a fallopian tube on its journey to the uterus, it will encounter the sperm. Hundreds of the much smaller sperms surround it and struggle to get inside. The egg is covered with a jelly-like coating that acts as a barrier. Enzymes from the sperm break down this barrier. Eventually, a single sperm is able to reach the egg.
As soon as the sperm crosses the egg cell membrane, leaving its tail behind, the membrane thickens, preventing any more sperm from entering. The genetic material from the head of the sperm fuses with genetic material in the nucleus of the egg. This is called fertilization.
As soon as fertilization occurs, the egg, now called a zygote, begins to divide rapidly as it continues its journey to the uterus. By the time the zygote reaches the uterus, it is a tiny hollow ball slightly larger than the diameter of a human hair. It burrows into the thickened wall of the uterus. Cells from the zygote and cells from the wall of the uterus together begin to form the placenta.
Later in the pregnancy, the placenta will provide nourishment to the growing embryo and fetus and get rid of waste. But at this earlier stage, the placenta produces a hormone that signals a woman's brain that she's pregnant. This prevents the maturing of eggs in her ovaries, and for the duration of the pregnancy, she no longer menstruates.
Fertilization has occurred, the zygote has attached itself inside the uterus, the placenta is forming. Pregnancy has begun.
Pregnancy lasts roughly 280 days from the last menstrual period and is divided into trimesters of about 12 to 13 weeks each. In the first trimester, the egg is released and is fertilized. During the early part of the first trimester,